Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here doing my spoiler discussion for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. This, of course, being a spoiler discussion, there's going to be a buttload of spoilers, so this is your official spoiler warning. If you want to check out my spoiler-free review, there's going to be a link in the description, so you can check that out, and then check out the movie, and then come back here for all things spoilers. Starting off with probably my favorite part of the spoilers for this film is honestly the cameos. There are cameos that basically reference the first film, but there are cameos that reference other things that probably will never be seen again in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And then there's cameos where it's like, that's a cool throwback. So, to start off, of course, we have Stan Lee, his cameo. He almost gets like a double cameo because it's him with the Watchers, and then he shows up as the final end credit sequence. So that was pretty cool. People have thought about the idea that he might be Uatu, the Watcher, who is like, so for anyone who doesn't know the Watchers, super quick thing, they literally watch. That is their name, they watch, they don't do anything, they just see what happens in the universe, they do nothing. Outside of this one character who kind of becomes enamored with Earth, and he goes to Earth. So people are kind of assuming that this is his character, and it's hard to say if that's the case because of course Stan Lee doesn't look like any of those characters, but also it's meant to be a reference. So it's pretty interesting that they did choose to do that, where he references specifically when he was in Civil War, because he, they like fly over his head. And he's like, oh, anyway, then I was a mailman, and I'm like, okay, that's very interesting. He's kind of telling them the story of him actually being one character throughout all these different films. So I thought that was a really cool way to do that. Of course, the characters with him are the Watchers, so that was pretty awesome to see them, even though once again they watch, so they don't really do much. But it was cool to see them. I don't know what the reference was. I think the first part they went over, it looked like it was Thanos fighting somebody. I don't know if that was him or just another character with that design, but I couldn't see it, and I've looked up some other Easter egg things, and no one's mentioned it so far, or at least not the video I saw in some of the articles I read. So I don't know what that reference was. It was just like a big open field. One person was fighting someone else. So it was a reference to two characters. I just couldn't tell because it was such a fast sequence. I was like, is that Thanos? But he looked too small for me to tell. But he was definitely like blue and looked like he had blue and gold. So I'm like, maybe that's Thanos? I wasn't 100% sure about that. So maybe you guys could tell me if you've seen the movie more than once and you were able to get a good look at who the heck that was. But I would just assume it wasn't Thanos. But I could be wrong. I don't really know. But that was an interesting little shot. They do two cameos that reference the first film, because we get, actually our very first cameo is Howard the Duck, which I thought was cool because they have him at he's like the post-credit sequence for the first Guardians of the Galaxy, so they kind of reference their own movie there. They have, they have the dog that was at the end of the first movie as well, in the same end credit sequence for the first film. Can't remember the dog's name, but it is an actual character from the Marvel Universe. So the dog, for whatever reason, they chose to just put a picture of the dog up in the end credits. So that dog is in there as well. The dog has like telekinetic powers. It was a dog that was sent to space. It got lost, and then it developed telekinetic powers. So that's the story of the dog. I just can't think of the name. So they did a self-reference for that. We got to see the Grandmaster, who is Jeff Goldblum's character from Thor Ragnarok. I thought that was very interesting, considering his cameo was him just dancing. And it was just during the end credits, I was like, that's really interesting that they chose to do that. I don't know if we should be expecting some sort of flyby cameo by the Guardians in Thor, if that's what they were trying to hint at there, or if it was just like, hey, Thor Ragnarok's coming out, so they just threw him in there because it made sense because of the big, universe thing that they're doing. It wouldn't make a lot of sense to be like, here's Spider-Man, who's going to be in New York. It's like, it's Thor, who's going to be, in other planets and stuff, so let's show off the Grandmaster. So I'm guessing that that's it. It would be cool if this was like a small hint, like we will see, at least for like half a second, maybe the Guardians just walking past doing something random. So I doubt that's the case, but it was interesting because they chose to do that for a reason. So I was like, okay, well, there's the Grandmaster from Thor Ragnarok. And I'm pretty sure Spider-Man's the one that's coming out next. So, I don't know. It was just like, hey, there it is, boom. Maybe it's because he's related to the Collector. I think it's supposed to be like his brother or something like that. So maybe that's why they did it, to once again kind of reference the first movie as well. And they also have another tie-in with Thor because, of course, the Collector first shows up in Thor. So maybe that was just a way to keep that weird sort of cycle going. But I thought that was cool. Let's see, who else do we get? Oh, we get Adam Warlock at the end, which was super freaking awesome. I was like, okay, I don't know what to expect from that. I heard that he wasn't going to be in, at least not the first Infinity War movie. So he might show up in part 2. But for anyone, once again, I'm doing like super small, tiny clips of history. Adam Warlock is basically beyond Ego. Like, Ego shows up, he's a Celestial and this and that. Adam Warlock is somewhat beyond that, only because of his tie into actually having, at least in the comics, he basically owns the Soul Gem. That's kind of like his thing, it's his, pretty much. So that tends to be why he's so incredibly powerful. And there's like an evil version of him that's like one of the most difficult villains in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that he always has to control. So I'm very excited to see how they do that. I would assume that he would show up at least in part 2. They made it official. He won't be in the first part, but I would assume he'd have to show up in part 2, considering they decided to introduce him, unless he's gonna, because I would assume that Guardians 3 is gonna come out after the Infinity Wars, and then whatever the second one is, since they decided to make them 2 totally different titles. So I would assume he's not going to show up in 3. He's going to show up just before that. So I don't know what we're going to really get out of his character, but I'm actually excited to see how they do that. I don't know too much about his character. I just knew like this character is like one of the really big sort of universe characters, and it's like, well, them introducing him is a really, really big deal. And he's kind of a big deal. Like I said, he typically has control over the Soul Gem. So we'll just see how, we'll have to see how all that stuff plays out. But that was a great reference to him. A lot of people mentioned before he was in the first Guardians of the Galaxy, so that's almost another way to reference the first movie as well, because his cocoon was owned by the Collector, and that's his thing, is that he basically goes into a cocoon, breaks out, and boom, he's reborn. So I don't know if they're going to make an actual reference to that and make it like flow with the story where he was in that cocoon and maybe they took it and put him in a new machine or something like that, because there was the passage of time between the first movie and this one, so maybe they can work it in there. Also, it's just a random reference cameo. It doesn't have to be like, we need to make a canon story from how this cocoon got from this random background scene all the way to, the gold people in this movie. So I don't think they'll actually do that, but it would be a cool bit of attention to detail. So really love that. And then my favorite cameo of all has to be the original Guardians of the Galaxy, because the whole way through, when they had Sylvester Stallone show up and he had the diamond dude next to him, I'm like, I don't know what it is. Something about this diamond guy looks insanely familiar to me. I just couldn't get it, but I'm like, I was like, first off, the design looked really great. Like the way they did the effects for the diamond character was sweet. But I was like, something about him is insanely familiar, and I just can't pick up on what it is. And so then they have, of course, after Yondu dies, and of course he has, the prototype Finn is based off of his original outfit from the comic books, minus, like, he basically looks like a jungle warrior in the original comics, with like the giant fin and stuff. But we get the big fin back, which was cool. And of course when he dies, all of the other Ravagers come together, and so then they have Sylvester Stallone, Ving Rhames, and then some other actors that unfortunately I just don't know, but they all come together, and he's like, I'm pretty sure he'd be excited to know that his death actually brought us back together again. And they show them all lined up, and I was like, oh, they're the original Guardians of the Galaxy. So I thought that was really awesome. They're from, I think it's an alternate future, something like that, Marvel. Just comics in general, actually, just different timelines and different futures. So they're like, that was the reference to the original version, which it was Yondu and basically all those characters. They like to switch them out or add characters. So I don't know who was like the actual first starting line, but I know Yondu was in there, and the diamond guy for sure. And I think the big guy was, and I don't know any of their names or anything. I just recognized them from images. So when they were all together, especially the dragon creature, I was like, okay, that really helped me, because I was like, okay, they're all lined up. I got it now. So that was personally my favorite reference. Just, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know why. But for some reason, it just made me super happy. I was like, that's actually a really awesome way to do it. I don't think they're going to end up being like the comic book version where it's like they're from, an alternate future and stuff. They were just the Ravagers in this version, but they were all an actual team. Who knows what they're going to do with that? It's really hard to say, because, they can't use Guardians of the Galaxy, because even though that's the original team, we already have the Guardians now, so, it couldn't be like Guardians of the Galaxy, the other Guardians of the Galaxy. So I don't know what they're going to do with that, or how they're going to show up in future iterations of the universe, or movies, or their own movies. I don't know if they'll even do that, because the characters are so minor, but it was interesting, and I really loved that cameo, so I certainly enjoyed that at the end there, and we'll see, what they end up doing in the future, but thought that was really awesome. Getting into the actual story of the film, outside of, like, all the references and all the cameos, there's another reference, possibly, to, Eternity, when Ego, like, touches Quill's head, and, like, his eyes basically look like stars are in him. He mentions Eternity, which is an actual character that looks like, space and time, so it's like he could literally see the character, which is everything. Literally everyone in the Marvel Cinematic Universe sees Eternity, because Eternity is the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I don't know why they even bothered to make that a character, just that they did. So there you go. But I thought it was really cool the way we go about getting to know Ego, and the way the movie starts, and the way his character certainly changes. Because going through this movie, I was like, okay, what is the villain? Like, I honestly hadn't considered like who really the villain was gonna end up being. Like, I didn't think it was gonna be Ego, to be totally honest. But they kind of went the almost zombie apocalypse route, where it just spread the virus and take control of everything sort of deal. And I like that. Honestly, I was like, this is really cool. We have the golden characters who everyone kind of assumed were the villains. And, you know, it starts off, they wouldn't be the villains if it weren't for Rocket still in the freaking batteries. But, you know, it was still interesting. So they become the villains. Of course, they lead into, you know, Adam Warlock, so they're very important apparently. But the way they transition Ego as a character, I thought was really well done, because he seems like this great character. He finds Peter. It's like, you know, I wanted you to, you know, be with me all this time, and I lost you because, you know, Yondu basically just took you, and I don't know why. So I love the way that they played it, where he's just this good character. He's this great guy. He makes the planet, and, you know, I was very curious how this is going to play out, but they kind of solve it at the end. But he talks with Peter and is like, hey, basically you can tap into this ability, and he's like forming, I mean, he made a ball, but, you know, he can like form stuff and things, and I'm like, how is this going to play out in the future of the entire cinematic universe? Because once you get up here, you're, you know, half celestial. You can do stuff way more than anybody else. Like, who needs the Avengers when this dude can just be like, I'm just going to form whatever I want. I can make a planet around me. How's that going to play out? Even if, you know, he's half human and half celestial. It's just like, all right, well, let's see how this plays out. But I love the way they did it. Of course, you know, it gets really crazy. Like, it got super dark too. Like, and this was for my spoiler-free review I mentioned. After like the big action and everything, and they meet Ego, I feel like the movie kind of dipped a little, because it was like there was so much reflective stuff. It was like Peter, like when he makes the ball, that was the beginning of the end. It was like he made that ball, and they were like playing catch. I was like, okay, that's kind of sappy, but, you know, that's a cool moment. And then it was like everybody after that, it was just like, here's a reflective moment, here's a reflective moment, here's another reflective moment. There's some good parts in between that, but I felt like that lasted for a long time, until things started to kind of come together, and everybody was starting to get the same answers all at one time. And it was like, okay, well, it's referenced early on that Mantis has something that she wants to tell Drax, so she doesn't get that opportunity. And then we have Gamora dealing with her sister and stuff, and I actually like the way that played out, where ultimately they kind of came together, because it kind of felt like Gamora was the evil one, because it was like Nebula's like, you just had to win constantly, as I was just continuously torn apart in front of you. And I was like, man, that almost does make Gamora seem like the villain, which they both were at, you know, at a time. So I love the way that that played out. I was like, Gamora was just better, and she was constantly winning. But for Nebula, it's like, you could have given me something. You could have lost one time. You could have let me freaking try. But instead, you just had to keep winning until he basically, you know, made me a full-on robot. And I didn't know she was like 100% robot, because she specifically says, he took my eye from my head, and then she's like, my brain from my skull. And I was like, oh, she's not even in her real body. So that I thought was interesting. But I like the way that that played out. And then, you know, the answers start coming together. They are in the caverns. They are like, you know, what's this light? They find all the bodies. Mantis is talking with Drax. Yondu is talking with Rocket, and he's telling him, like, this is actually the reason I ended up keeping Quill. It wasn't just because he was small. This is the real reason I ended up doing it. And of course, you know, Peter is with his dad, and when he realizes, and this was one of the things where I was like, man, they did some heartbreaking stuff in this film. This was part one. I think Yondu's death was definitely part two. But Peter, he's like, you know, completely mesmerized and everything. He's like, I understand, and this and that. And Ego is basically controlling his mind. And he was like, man, really hated having to go back and just drop that tumor in her head. And it was just like, wow, I could not believe he said that. And of course that takes Peter out of it, and he just starts lighting him up, and then that's when all hell breaks loose. And it was just like, once that moment hit, it really picked up for me, and I really loved it. Like, that was the final moment. Everybody's getting answers, everybody's freaking out, because this dude is an effing planet who can, like, you know, he's trying to take over all other planets. And it seems simple. Honestly, in that opening sequence where he's like, you know, I plant this and then it'll be all across the universe, I legitimately was thinking, oh, he's trying to make some money selling like some space plants or something, or, you know, making like these magical forests or whatever. And then it's like, nope, he's using that to make giant blobs that will literally cover entire planets and make everything him, because he thinks that that's better. And it was like, huh, that's really effing nuts and evil. So love the way they did it. Oh, actually, now that I think about it, That moment led to another cameo that I forgot, which is David Hasselhoff. So that was pretty awesome. I didn't think he'd actually show up, but they had him show up in that moment where he's actually there, and then we also see him again at the end credits where he's doing like the final narration or something during the credits. So I was like, okay, we get like two little moments there. I totally forgot about him showing up, but it was really great. I was like, once that happened and Peter's fighting against his dad, and he like shoots him up and it's just like holes and stuff. That was great. And then of course we have the gold people coming in, and that causes more chaos. They're killing them all. Well, they aren't really killing them because they were all used like arcade cabinets, which was super awesome. I love that. Which also reminds me, during the scene when Gamora was running from Nebula, those sound effects, and I think for some of you, you're gonna know what I'm gonna say, but those sound effects are straight from Star Wars, like 100%. There are some moments like when the ship would like fly over, I was like, that is an exact sound effect from an X-Wing in Star Wars. Like, I know my Star Wars sound effects. That was an X-Wing, or any ship really, they change them up. But I was like, that's a Star Wars sound effect that they're using right now. Even some of the blasts, I was like, that's a Star Wars blast. Like, I can hear it. So that was interesting. I don't know, it's all owned by Disney now, so I don't know if that was meant to be a reference there. And it's like, hey, we got, we now have the rights, because, well, it's sound effects, but you can copyright all sorts of stuff. So that was interesting. I don't know if that was on purpose. I would have to assume it was, because it's a Star Wars sound effect. People that are like super nerds like me are going to realize that that's a Star Wars sound effect. So I feel like that had to have been on purpose, but that was something I definitely noticed. But they're going through all the battles and stuff, and it's just intense. We got Baby Groot inside the thing. Baby Groot was super awesome. The whole movie, super cute. And there are even moments where he like cries, like the part where Ego is starting to take over, and he's actually crying when he's getting crushed. I was like, man, they totally play up on the emotions for little Baby Groot and him. And the opening was super awesome, just dancing around and him being mad, but being so tiny and weak. He can't really do much through most of the movie, except when he got his revenge on that one dude and he killed him. But like when they're at the very end and Drax is like, move stupid smaller Groot, and Groot's trying to like hit him on his arm, and he's super mad that he was calling him dumb. And I was like, I love that, because he's super pissed off, but there's nothing he can do. So I really enjoyed that. But the action I thought was great at the end, and then we actually get like a crazy superhero fight sequence, because we have Ego going up against Peter, and they're both using their abilities, and it was actually pretty entertaining. So I really enjoyed that. We get to see a cool Pac-Man reference, so everybody loves Pac-Man. So that was super awesome, because that was when I was like, oh, that's cool. He's going to be like, it's going to be Peter, but he's going to be like all gold versus his father. It was like, nope, he's Pac-Man. So that was a cool reference to earlier, when he was like, man, I'm going to be making like some weird shit. So I thought that was actually a pretty cool way to reference that earlier line. But the end action sequence was definitely great. Once again, it got to the emotional stuff when everyone's able to get off the planet, and there are only two people that are able to get out, and of course it's Yondu and Peter, and there's one flight suit and one space suit, and so Yondu actually sacrifices himself, and he has a great ending dialogue where he's like, Ego may have been your dad, but he wasn't your father, or no, it was in the reverse. It was like, he may have been your father, but he wasn't your daddy, and it was really good. Like, I really love that ending sequence, and he sacrifices himself, and Peter's just stuck there like he can't take the pin off of himself, and it was just good. I was like, man, this is a surprisingly emotional moment, so I really love that. And then even after that, when the people do actually show up, because Rocket's like, I let some of his Ravager buddies know what he did, and they actually came out, so I was like, even that was actually a cool moment and stuff, and I was like, man, this is surprisingly emotional, so I really enjoyed what they did there. All the action I thought was actually good. They really kicked up the action for this movie, so I certainly enjoyed that. The jokes were definitely good. A lot of the good jokes, or I shouldn't say a lot of the good jokes, but some of my favorite jokes were the ones that we saw from the trailers, but there were definitely some other ones in there that really made me laugh, like them not killing Groot because he was too adorable. That was a really good one that I loved. One of the end credit sequences with teenage Groot was super awesome, and Peter's like, you need to like clean up your vines and stuff, and Groot's like playing the game and everything. So that was super awesome. It also shows like just a passing of time even in the end credit sequences, because he went from like super tiny to like a teenage Groot. So I'm assuming he'll be full grown Groot by the time we see him again. But I thought that was really funny. So I guess by the time they hit Avengers Infinity Wars, he'll be big Groot again. But that was kind of an awesome sequence, because I didn't even think about them going through like different stages of Groot, and he does have the different emotions, which I also didn't think was going to be a thing until the movie kind of got going, because we see him actually be sad, and we see him like as a little baby where he wants to be held by everybody at the end, and he like falls asleep on like Drax's shoulder and stuff. So I was like, okay, you know, it was cool going through the movie, and he actually has, outside of some of his group moments, like killing the one dude, he has his baby tendency, so it was definitely cute there. But really love the characters. I like Mantis, so I'm excited to see kind of her learn the world since she grew up with just ego. That should be very interesting to see how they decide to expand on that character. Nebula decides to leave the team behind and kind of go on her own way, but her and Gamora have a nice ending moment. So that was cool. I like the way that they did the development with the characters, even though that one moment in the middle of the movie, everybody did it all at once. I still like the way everything kind of worked out by the end. But I really enjoyed this film. Love the cameos, love the action, love the comedy. Didn't love that reflective moment being just one reflective piece after another, because it made it feel like it just dragged on forever, because it was the same type of scene over and over and over. It happened like 4 times in a row, and I was like, all these moments are technically good, but it feels weird to have the same type of moment with 4 different groups of characters all in a row. And it's like something about that just didn't feel right as I was watching it. It just dragged it down. But still a really fun movie. Love the cameos. Very excited to see where we're headed for the future of the universe. But of course, I would love to know what you guys thought about this film. So please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts, least favorite parts. Really, my biggest question is, do you guys like this one or the first one more? Because for me personally, I still like the first one more, and it's mostly because of that part where it dips. I just felt like the first movie didn't have that reflective, serious moment for nearly as long as this one did. And that's the only reason I feel like it dragged. Everything else, like before that and everything after, I felt was perfect, just like the first movie, where it's like a nice balance, some serious stuff, funny stuff, action stuff. But that middle part for this, it was like, we gotta find a place to throw in all the character development that was impossible in the first film. So here it all is at once. And they did some great stuff, because honestly, the Yondu rocket scene, that was also one of my favorites, where Yondu's like, you know, you're the most scared out of everybody, and you were ditched and stuff, and like, I know you because you're me. That was honestly one of my favorite parts of the whole movie. I was like, that was actually really, really good. But we'll love to know which film you guys liked the most, and what else you guys thought about the film, so please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.